video sull'MMO che ha fatto Necrit. Il signor Necrit. Ah no, che stupido. Eccolo qua. Race and classes of Riot MMO according to lore. Allora. Cos'è? Questo... Com'è entrato? È entrato così. Wow.
Well.
Mi fa morire da ridere. Uscirà nel 2030. Secondo me no. Vedremo, faremo a gara chi ha ragione. Allora, voglio vedere. Vi metto i sottotitoli in inglese come l'altra volta e ci godiamo questo bel video.
Well, I'm back. Last time we had a look at the world of Riot's MMO, and we talked about how the overall world design has been done for a few years now. If you have no idea what League's universe is about, I would recommend watching that one first.
Abbiamo già
But
visto.
now that we learned about the basics, we can dive into the other big MMO topic.
Vai.
The playable races and classes.
Allora, non penso che ci sia bisogno che io traduca, ok? Ora andiamo a vedere secondo lui e secondo la lore del gioco quali saranno le classi e le razze giocabili.
When it comes to the races,
Uè, ma che bella Queen! Chi è questo tizio
just
qui?
like the world, they are pretty much done. Over the years, the lore fleshed out the races of Runeterra, and now they each have their own unique story. In fact, at this point, it feels like we
Bellissimo, sto set di armatura è stupendo.
know Riot will not make up a brand new race. Of course, they could always theoretically do it, but I seriously doubt they would. Because that would be like forcing a new race into the world of Lord of the Rings. It would feel off among all the already established rules. I strongly doubt you wanna put a bunny person next to Aragorn. With that said, don't worry, because the lore will allow Riot to make up new races and make them feel natural. I'll show you their clever system in just a moment. But for now, just know that yes, we already know the race.
Uè, ma guarda quanti altri piccoli cannon che ci sono. Ce n'è uno che è un demone, guardalo, c'ha la faccia da demone.
Of this world. So the question is not going to be what races Riot is going to make up. The question is going to be, from the races that already exist.
Madonna, che è sta bestia gigante? Oddio, no, voglio giocare un Vastaia adesso. Voglio giocare un Vastaia enorme. Che è il padre di Rengar. Ma che bestia che è?
Which ones will be playable? And perhaps more importantly, how will they be playable? You see, a few years back, I released a similar video where we talked about the classes and the races together with TB Skyen. And today, I would not recommend you watch that video. Back then, I was still clinging onto the idea that faction-based MMOs were a good idea. It worked for WoW, and it worked for my guilty pleasure, Wildstar.
È incredibile come Warcraft sia sempre dentro a qualunque theorycraft o cose quando si parla di MMORPG o quando si parla di League, perché alla fine Warcraft è pesantemente presente in League of Legends, anche se noi non lo vediamo più.
Unfortunately, what I didn't know is that merely a year later, the idea of faction-based MMOs would crumble to dust. That's because factions have a massive flaw. Besides the fact that PvP is almost guaranteed to be one-sided. I mean, who would want to play for the losing side?
Chi vorrebbe giocare per l'Alliance, giusto? Sono d'accordo. Che schifo l'Alli. Sempre Orda, sempre e comunque.
Especially if there is no compensation. Classic WoW is a perfect proof of that.
LOL. Tutti World.
Not to mention New
Oddio, New World, esatto. Chi è che vuole giocare quando non hai neanche un singolo territorio?
World. But also, if you split everyone into two sides, you are splitting up your player base.
Per questo League è così bello. Perché non c'è Orda alleanza. Anche Demacia e Noxus. Ok, sono antagonisti, ma non è uno buono e uno cattivo. Sono entrambi... Oddio, io in realtà direi che Demacia è quella cattiva, però vabbè. Sono entrambi per i cazzi loro, cioè non è che c'è una side buona e una cattiva.
And that is almost never a good idea. You simply don't want to prevent people from playing together. The reason why in the past it worked for WoW is because Blizzard heavily played into the faction pride. People were proud to fight for the Horde or the Alliance.
Esatto.
But even back then, it really wasn't perfect. And then people started min-maxing the game and they realized that factions didn't matter. And that's where Riot has the edge.
In poche parole sta dicendo che non ci sarà più un gioco fatto a classi della serie Blood Elf solamente Orda e Nano solamente Alleanza. Qua le razze e le classi saranno per tutti, qualunque fazione voi vorrete. Non so, volete affiliarvi a Noxus, potete fare anche un Vastaia, un Ioniano che si affilia a Noxus, anche se fa ridere. Un secondo, devo portare un po' di luce.
You may know that League of Legends has a lot of different regions, where they all act independently and they all have unique relationships with their neighbors. Because of this, forcing faction alliances into this world would ruin the already established lore. So PvP factions are most likely not going to be a thing.
Meno male.
However, despite that, League absolutely has faction pride.
Ah, voglia.
People love it when a new Shuriman champion is announced because people love that place. And people love it when the new champion is not Ionian because goddamn we have too many Ionians.
Minchia, veramente, i campioni ioniani sono tantissimi, ma perché sono i più fighi, sono tutti ninja e furri.
Nearly every League of Legends player.
Oh, guarda, Jarvan! Questo è il padre, però. È Jarvan I, quello che è morto. E questo qua mi sa che è lui. E questa qua è la zia di Garen e Lux. Come si chiama? Non mi ricordo. Vabbè, è una stronza comunque.
Has a favorite region. And you bet when the MMO comes out, people will want to play for that region. And this is where the brilliance of Riot's world kicks in. You see, the fundamental lore of League of Legends.
Certo che le armature di Demacia sono veramente belle. Ok, sono il classico soldato in armatura di piastre, però sono fighe.
Is based around the idea that anyone can be from any region.
Guarda
After an event the story refers to as the westward migration, races mixed up all around the world. So it's not like there is a furry region where you can only see furries. There are definitely regions where you can see more furries, but this world doesn't have exclusives.
Belli
This
poro.
means that when you're picking up what you want to
Ma
play,
posso essere un
besides
poro?
just picking a race and a class combination, I strongly suggest Riot also allows people to pick their origin, with the origin being the starting region. Without a system like this, you would force all human champions to be, for example, Noxian. And that is simply not how this world works. So,
Questo è interessante, ha praticamente detto che se fanno un sistema di origini, che ne so, un Vastaia può essere anche di Piltover, perché ha origini lì. Invece in teoria un Vastaia dovrebbe essere per forza ioniano, perché è lì che sono nati.
I've been mumbling about how this world works for quite a while. So now, let's actually dive into all the races that exist in this universe. Spoiler alert, League doesn't have too many different races, because it's focusing on depth over variety. Of course, as it is with any RPG, there is the human race. But it would be cool if the humans varied depending on their origins. For example, if you pick a human from the Freljord, they would be an Iceborn and they would have extra frost resistance.
Come Skyrim. Ci sono diversi umani su Skyrim, no? Ci sono i Nord, ci sono le Redguard, ci sono i Bretoni, eccetera, eccetera. Sono tutti umani, ma hanno caratteristiche diverse e origini diverse. Quindi immagino che sarà così.
A Demacian could have a bit more magic resistance, Ionians could have a bit more nature resistance, Shuriman's heat resistance, and so on. Iceborn, and they would have extra frost resistance.
Era mastery con
Demacian could
Wukong.
have a bit more magic resistance,
Queste sono masterie Wukong, raga. Un piccolo Wukong e un giovane mastery. Che brutto con la barbetta, però.
Ionians could have a bit more nature resistance, Shuriman's heat resistance, and so on. I think it's going to be crucial for Riot to preserve the feeling of every origin feeling at least slightly different. This is an RPG after all, and
Quelli che vengono da Zone hanno poison resistance, immagino.
despite the fact that balancing is usually a big issue, I strongly believe these RPG elements have to be preserved. But if Riot is afraid of people min-maxing the game from the very beginning, focusing on the origin stat with the most value, Riot can always do the safe thing and only give each origin different...
Mica, raga, ma è allucinante come anche i personaggi secondari, quelli che non sono campioni, sono belli. Io lo ripeto allo sfinimento. Riot ha tutti i difetti del mondo quando si parla di League of Legends, ma il suo comparto artistico musicale secondo me non è inferiore a nessuno, nemmeno a Blizzard. Cioè le artwork anche di, non so, comparse o comunque NPC del cazzo sono proprio belli. E non sono mai banali, cioè sono più o meno... Ok, questa è una cazzo di piratessa banalissima, però è proprio bella.
Customization.
O forse sono io che sono
In
di
the
parte, non so.
Freljord, people tend to be more pale with...
Cioè, guardate questo qui. Ma guardate quel tizio a destra. Ma guardate quel tizio a destra, messo così. Cioè, è una stronzata, ma poi fa ridere, è bello. Cioè, ti rimane impressa una faccia del cazzo così.
lush beards and Nordic tattoos all over their bodies.
Ash non sente il freddo. Ash non sente il freddo perché è un Iceborne. Per quello può tenere l'arco di ghiaccio.
Have the classic dreadlock style. People from Bilgewater have the pirate crew tattoos. Piltovans are your fancy mustache people, and Ionians have the wild untamed hair and beards. So even without special origin stats, I do believe these unique character customizations would enhance the region pride too. So...
Ma infatti Legend of Runeterra secondo me è un gioco fatto benissimo. A me non piacciono i giochi di carte. Ma se io dovessi scegliere tra Hearthstone e questo, io sceglierei Runeterra tutta la vita. È bellissimo, le animazioni sono fighe, le hardcore sono bellissime.
That's what humans would be about. Pretty versatile and nothing too special in an RPG world. So now, let's have a look at the more unique races.
Questa qua non sembra la classica waifu degli anime. Un pochino sì, dai.
After humans, the second most spread out race are the Vastaya. As we mentioned in the last video, the Vastaya are a race that came to be after humans started mating with magical animals. But the thing is, depending on where they are from, there are loads of different kinds.
Ecco, ora dobbiamo chiederci quali umani hanno fatto con quali bestie magiche. Qui c'è un maiale con le orecchie da pipistrello, io non voglio sapere nulla.
The Vastaya. From cat boys to fox girls to lizard girls. In fact, here's a family tree of all the Vastayan tribes, and even this doesn't cover all of them. And this is where Riot can pull off something genius.
Minchia, quanti sono?
As I said, this world already has set rules. So it would be very difficult to introduce a brand new race into this universe. However, it is going to be very easy to just make up a new Vastayan tribe.
Beh, certo, mica va che albero genealogico c'hanno. Marai, Makara, Carnivorous, Eversmiling, Tribe of the Sea. Tribe of the Sea penso che sia quella di Fizz. E anche di Nami. Non mi ricordo se Nami è una Vastalia, penso di sì. Kilash mi sembra che sia la tribù di Rengar, se non ricordo male. Vabbè, Ari.
So I propose that Riot doesn't make the Vastaya as a playable race overall, but instead it would be cool if Riot let the specific tribes to be playable races.
Ma così diventa enorme. Oddio, quante razze vuoi fare? 30, 50? Sarebbe figo, perché ci sarebbe un sacco di varietà.
This would leave the door open for them to introduce new playable races later down the line.
Ah beh, ok, sì.
If they cross off
Quello
all
sì.
the Vastaya at once, they kinda shoot themselves in the foot.
Infatti, ha detto che se loro volessero mettere tutte le tribù dei Vastaya come razze giocabili a sé stanti, non lo fanno tutto in una botta sola. Magari ne mettono 3 o 4 e poi le altre fanno espansioni pian piano.
But I know. Here I go mumbling about how the world works again. So let's have a look at some of the specific tribes. When I say Vastaya, most people think of Ari. She comes from the Vasani that look like foxes. Although her tribe is mostly gone, the lore can justify new members to be found, so they can be playable. The Kilash tribe comes from the jungles between Shurima and Ishtar.
Avevo ragione.
These lion-like
I Kilash sono la tribù di Rengar.
Dangerous beasts, and they take great pride in trophy collecting.
Rengar è bellissimo. È stupendo, io lo adoro come è fatto, non come campione. Come campione no.
It's the average mount collector. The Shimon tribe are monkey-like people from Ionia. While their older members are very wise, their younger members can be very goofy. The Otrani come from Mount Targon, resembling the classic goat people.
Sì, sono le
Their
pecore.
hobbies are taking care
Ma guarda quanto sono belli! Ma guarda quanto sono belli! Questa è una cazzo di capra umanoide, ma è bellissima! Io non so come cazzo fanno.
of the Stellarcorns. The Lothland tribe are Ionians who resemble bird people. This tribe likes to combine the art of dancing with lethal assassinations. The Uvikat are something close to lizards, though they do have the ability to shapeshift. Out of all of the other tribes, these are the closest to their pure blood ancestors. And we also technically have the Marai, the fish people whom I doubt are going to be playable. Imagine modeling boots for them. Now, these were the more pure blood tribes, but there are many more Vastaya who don't fit any of these. For example, Set has an Ionian Vastayan mother and a Noxian human father. So he
Che probabilmente l'ha stuprata. Durante la guerra. Molto probabilmente.
doesn't really have a tribe. Long story short, the Vastaya are an incredibly versatile race and Riot can use them in a million different ways. This is where they can really go wild. But that's it for the Vastaya. So now, let's have a look at the third most popular race. The Yordles.
Oh.
These are the classic RPG
Chi è che farà uno Yordle? Che sono belli gli Yordle, per carità, ma chi è che farà uno Yordle?
people. In League of Legends, people either adore them
Or
or
fear
hate them. There is no in between.
È
Kinda
vero.
like those guys.
Ah,
But
che
not
schifo
those guys,
sono!
everyone hates them.
Mica veramente. Io vi giuro, ragazzi, quando giocavo a Warcraft, qualunque gnomo di merda che vedevo lo odiavo a prescindere. Mi chiedevo, ma chi cazzo può fare una roba così brutta?
There is no doubt in my mind that Yordles will be playable, even though they have an interesting catch. You see, unlike all the other races on Runeterra, Yordles are immortal. They are essentially
Sì, loro sono magici. Infatti la gente li teme. Non so se avete visto il cinematic di Graves, Twisted Fate e i vari Yordle. La gente ha paura di loro, per quello che Ziggs e Heimerdinger si camuffavano con la magia a Piltover.
modes of magic that come from a hidden magical realm known as Bandle City. And because they are made of magical essence, when they die, we don't really know what happens. But we assume they return to the Bandle City and there they respawn. With that said, the lore
loro giocano a League nel loro mondo praticamente. Quando crepano respawnano e fine. Sì.
suggests that maybe Yordles can die, but they just can't die of old age. But let's ignore that. That's a massive rabbit hole.
Ah sì, perché Heimerdinger c'è 300... Oddio, chi è? Chi è questo qua? Timo muscoloso? Ma lol! Ah no, Timo è sopra. E chi è? Uno del suo team.
So, you know, when it comes to gameplay,
Top team! Timo sotto steroidi.
Now, because Yordles are immortal, in most cases they are always happy and cheerful. Even their home realm is very colorful because of that.
Ah, questo è il mercante, raga. Questo è il mercante che ti vende gli oggetti.
Then there is also Vex, a Yordle champion who has recently been added into League of Legends,
c'è anche Veigar,
who gives Yordles an interesting perspective.
Anche Veigar c'è.
You see, unlike all the other Yordles, Vex hates living. She hates the bright colors and the cheerfulness. You know, it's the average League player. So Vex is constantly in deep depression and agony. All she wishes for is to leave this world, but she can't, because Yordles can't die. Anyway, just like all the other races, Yordles can be found all around Runeterra. There is Poppy in Demacia, Kled in Noxus, Kennen in Ionia, Rumble in Shurima, and so on. But now, so far we have only covered the races which I'm pretty sure will launch with the MMO. The humans, the Vastaya, and the Yordles are the core of this world. So now we are diving into the races that still exist in this universe. But it's going to be up to Riot if they make them playable. First of all, there are the Minotaurs. The Minotaurs are different from the Vastaya because they don't have magical ancestors. They are just a standalone race. Originally, the Minotaurs controlled the...
Alistar è di una razza a parte? Io pensavo fosse un Vastaya. Alistar è una cosa totalmente a parte?
mountains south of Noxus. But because Noxus is Noxus...
No, Rumble è di Bundle City, ovviamente. Però risiede a Shurima in questo momento.
Soon they absorbed the Minotaurs into their empire. With that said, some Minotaurs fled the tyranny of Noxus and they joined the other region.
Vabbè, loro sono i Tauren, raga. Loro sono i Tauren. Classic tencone gigante o warrior, dai.
A great example is Kryl, the Minotaur fighting in the elite armies of Demacia. And yes, the Minotaurs also have the stereotypical sexy female...
No, non potete sessualizzarmi un cazzo di cavallo, vi prego. No!
...version in this universe, so they can easily be turned
C'è
into
un cavallo, una
race.
mucca, anzi.
Next, in Bilgewater, there is an incredible amount of weird fishy people. A lot of these could be really cool playable races.
Ma che... Madonna santa, raga, io non riesco più ad avere parole per la bellezza degli artwork, veramente. Ma quanto è figo sto coso. Ma quanto è figo sto coso. Questo qua è tipo Tankench se fosse palestrato.
Is when Bilgewater gets its expansion. Although modeling helmets for a hammerhead shark is going to be interesting. We also can't forget about the trolls. Previously I showed you the ice trolls, but there are also the sand trolls. And here's an interesting fact for League veterans. We have never seen a sand troll, but because of Ezreal's adventures, we know they exist. They should be around Icathia, which is where Jax
bravo,
is
esattamente. E la razza del Void?
from, who also has 3 fingers, by the way. So it is extremely likely that the mysterious Jax is a sand troll. Regardless, the majority of trolls are united.
È vero, non ci avevo mai pensato. I troll hanno 3 dita. Jax ha 3 dita. Jax è un troll. Ecco perché non mostra la faccia. Raga, Jax è un cazzo di troll.
Under Trundle, the self-proclaimed Troll King, who is fighting in the service of Lysandra, who is a baddie even though she is morally right. So since the majority of the trolls are our enemies, I doubt they will be a playable race. Lastly, let's not forget that this universe also has Yetis. Fun fact, before everything got frozen, the Yeti civilization was very advanced. They even had their own technology based around magic. In fact, Willump, the Yeti Nunu is riding on, is a hologram from the Yeti technology. But then, as the civilization
Cosa? Come un ologramma?
even had their own technology based around magic. In fact, Willump, the Yeti Nunu is riding on, is a hologram from the Yeti technology. But then, as the civilization disappeared, the Yetis went a bit more
Non l'ho capita
ferocious.
questa. Devo leggere la
So
loro di
no,
nuovo.
they won't be playable either. But that's pretty much it for the races.
Chi è questa gnoccona? Chi è questa gnoccona? Chi è questa gnoccona? La voglio.
As I mentioned, there aren't too many different kinds, but that's because Riot is avoiding mimicking other RPGs. That's why there are no dwarves or elves here. Runeterra is simply trying to be unique in every way,
Che
and
bella, che cazzo quanto è bella.
so far, it is working.
Mi sto ripetendo troppo.
Now, I also have seen some people asking if Darkin will be playable.
Darkin secondo me saranno una specie di Death Knight di WoW. Arriveranno dopo, avranno già il loro livello. Boh, poi stavo sparando a caso.
Which I have to say, that's like asking if you can play as a god. The Darkin are a corrupted version of the Ascended God Warriors. A single Darkin can annihilate an army of 1,000. In fact, the Darkin known as Aatrox is the only being in existence that managed to kill a celestial god. He stabbed someone wielding the power of the Aspect of War so hard, the Aspect of War died. So no, I don't think Darkin will be playable.
Ecco perché Atrox c'ha le interazioni con Panther, non lo sapevo.
Anyway, with all the races covered, assuming Riot is going to use the Origin system, this is what the playable races could look like. Humans are versatile, they are everywhere, there is not much to mention there. When it comes to the Vastaya, the common tribes can easily appear in Noxus, Piltover and Bilgewater. These are the regions open to everyone. On the other side, the Vastaya are closely linked to spiritual magic, so you will hardly find one in Demacia, since it is a firmly anti-magic region.
Vero.
And
Oddio, Pop in realtà... Ah no, Vastaya stai dicendo.
somehow not many Vastaya were ever mentioned in the Freljord, so Riot doesn't have to force them there. But then we have Shurima, Ionia and Targon. Assuming these would be saved for expansions, they could be used to introduce new playable races. Since I doubt all the newcomers remember the names, the Kilash, Lothlan and Otrani...
Sì, i Darkin saranno sicuramente raid boss come Mordekaiser o come altri campioni godlike, tipo gli aspetti della guerra, gli aspetti di Targon.
Are the Lion People, Bird People and Goat People. When it comes to the Yordles, as I mentioned, they can originate from anywhere, but they do avoid the Freljord and Targon because of the harsh climates. And yes, I know that
agli Yordle non piace il freddo. Non lo sapevo.
there were some prehistoric Yordles in the Freljord.
Ah
but
già.
after it got
Oddio,
covered
cos'è la tribù di Gnar questa? No, vabbè, cos'è? Gnar femmina, oddio.
in ice, they disappeared. And lastly, the Minotaurs can be found in Demacia and Noxus. But it does make sense for some of them to flee to the Freljord, and others to travel to Ionia during the invasion. With all of this said, remember, this is just my decently educated opinion, since the races are pretty much mixed up all over
Esatto, queste sono solamente sue supposizioni, ma secondo me sono molto azzeccate.
Runeterra. Riot could also lift the limitations and let every race start in every region, and I would be fine with it.
Sì, anche per me sarebbe meglio, sarebbe più bello. Che qualunque cosa tu picchi puoi scegliere di partire da Demacia, da Noxus, da Freljord, da dove cazzo te pare. Perché così c'è un sacco di varietà, no? Puoi scegliere la tua regione preferita e partire da lì.
Some story would be wonky, but it wouldn't be anything horrible. Although, I still believe some racial exclusivity helps the feeling of RPGs. So, all of this is still only the first half of the video. If you wanna take a break and do your business without washing your hands, now's your chance.
This program will continue in 5 seconds.
C'è un gatto sul libro di Yumi.
Did you wash your hands?
No.
Okay, so far we only covered the races, which was definitely still the easy part. The much more difficult part are going to be the classes. This is where Riot is facing a great challenge.
Le classi qua è un problema. Ci sono talmente tante abilità su League che qualcuna devi per forza metterla in qualche classe. Vedremo come lo faranno.
Partially, it's because there are inherently no wrong answers when it comes to designing a class system. You can really make anything work if you put some thought into it. But more than that, Riot is challenged by the setting itself. League of Legends currently has over 160 different champions.
E ognuno di essi ha 4 abilità e una passiva. Quindi fai 160 per 5. Fa 500, 6 per 5, 800.
They each have unique abilities and together they can define about 40 different classes. I counted them myself. From these, Riot has to pick only a handful to be playable, which means the majority of the classes won't make it in, and people who love those classes will be disappointed. Thankfully, I'm not a designer, so instead of trying to figure out how to make this work, I'm going to show you all the cool, unique classes this universe has. And again, because region pride is a big part of this universe, you'll see that some of these are tied to
Belle le sopracciglia di Pantheon, è andato all'estetista.
specific regions. But not the warrior. That one is different in every single region. So let's start with that. The warriors in this universe provide a unique challenge on top of the already difficult decisions. It's because in every region, the fantasy of a warrior is represented by something else. In Demacia, it is the Dauntless Vanguard. These are the classic knights in shiny armor pursuing justice. In Noxus, the traditional warrior would be part of the Trifarian Legion, which is a rank.
Se non ricordo male, la legione Trifarian è quella. Dovrebbe essere la legione d'elite di Noxus, quella che comanda Darius. Cioè, proprio la cosa più alta possibile, i guerrieri più forti. Se non ricordo male, spero di non dire cazzate.
you can achieve after killing your best sparring friend in combat.
Ah già, è vero, lol, diventi un membro del Trifarian ammazzando il tuo sparring partner. Tipo c'è la porra del fuoco.
These guys rarely use shields. In Shurima, the classic warrior is the warrior of the Golden Army. These are fighting for the glory of the Shuriman Emperor. In Piltover, you would have the Enforcers.
Questa cosa è bellissima perché sta dicendo la classe guerriera, classico, no? Se voi pensate alla classe guerriera, cosa pensate? Classico, non so, tizio gigante con l'asciona in mano, con la spadona o con, non so, spada e scudo. La cosa bella è che, come ha detto lui, a Demacia il classico guerriero è il cavaliere, ok? A Noxus è il tizio gigante con l'asciona. A Shurima invece sono un po' più esili, ma magari saranno un po' più agili. Invece qui a Piltover, dove giustamente non è una nazione evoluta, i guerrieri saranno molto probabilmente gli Enforcer, ovvero vabbè, quelli che abbiamo visto, i poliziotti, abbiamo visto su Arcane.
Simply said, it's the cops. People will know.
Esatto, i poliziotti.
He's from Arcane. But in
The
a
cops.
way, the Wardens are the melee warriors of Piltover.
Immaginate cosa succede se una guardia di Piltover incontra Black Alistair.
But then, in the Freljord, warriors are represented by the Berserks, either wielding axes or giant blades as they worship the primal god known as the Iron Boar. On Targon, we have the warriors of Rakor, which are somewhat themed after the classic Spartan armies. Then, in Ionia, the classic warrior is known
E i samurai.
as a Blade Master, with samurai-styled swords that have a rich history in this region.
Madonna, se fanno una cosa del genere è bellissima. Cioè, stupendo che la classe guerriero non sia uguale per ogni razza. Sarebbe bellissimo.
Also, there are the Vuju Blade Masters, which are on a totally different level. The Vuju technique is so powerful it was forbidden from using it in combat. The TLDR version of the story is
Ah, quindi Master Yi cheata, pezzo di merda.
that when Noxus invaded Ionia, Master Yi obliterated entire Noxian legions on his own. Before Noxians realized how overpowered he was, and they nuked the town where the Vuju Blade Masters were trained.
LOL, cioè avete capito? Avete capito? Master Yi, allora, siccome il Vuju è una tecnica proibita super broken, Master Yi da solo ha obliterato un'intera legione di Noxus. Poi hanno capito che era troppo overpower e l'hanno bombardata di gas tossici. LOL, Master Yi è broken. Master Yi è broken pure nella lore, non solo nel gioco.
So now there is no more Vuju Blade Masters, just normal Blade Masters. And lastly, the common warrior in Bilgewater would be a brawler. You see, I just named 8 different kinds of warriors. How is Riot going to handle this? I don't know. They could just make one warrior class and then just have the players play out the fantasy while wearing cool armor sets. Or they could make it so that every origin has a different skin of the class. You know, all the abilities would be the same, they would be doing the same numbers, but when a Noxian swings a weapon, there is a bloody trail, and when an Iceborne Berserk swings a weapon, there is a frosty effect.
Sarebbe la cosa più giusta. Cioè, per quanto sia figo, ovviamente, avere tanti diversi tipi di guerrieri, sarebbe per loro un casino farlo. Cioè, quanto cazzo ci metti a fare... Cioè, è solamente per la classe guerriera. Se invece hanno dei diversi effetti visivi, sarebbe, penso, la cosa più giusta e figa, tra l'altro.
But again,
E diverse armi, ovviamente. Ovviamente non vai a mettere a un Demasiano un'ascia di Noxus.
this is for Riot to figure out. Now I'm just going to show you all the unique and interesting classes from this universe. In Demacia, we have the Mage Seekers. These are the people who hunt down mages. They carry with them a stone disc called the Grey Mark. This is the tool that allows them to absorb magic. So this would be sort of an anti-magic class. There are also a lot of iconic Demacian scouts. Also, Demacia has a lot of stories about theaters and bards. But Demacia also brought spotlight onto the Sentinels. The Sentinels of Light are people dedicated to fighting the undead. Because the undead can't really be killed with normal weapons, they use the relic stones that can be forged into any weapon. Be it a crossbow, a gun, a really big gun, or even a sword. Fun fact, in the lore, the Sentinel guns don't have triggers. You have to will it to fire with every fiber of your body.
Ah, praticamente sparano magia, quindi.
So of course, Lucian canonically fired it with his PP. Lastly, this will be unknown to even veteran League players, but Demacia put a really cool twist onto the Paladin class. You see, in League of Legends, when you play as Garen, his ultimate is to smite his enemies with a giant holy blade. This made people wonder, is Garen a mage? In
No, è la spada che ha assorbito magia.
Demacia? Actually, no. In the lore, Garen has never done anything even similar to this. And that's because there is something even cooler happening. Most people in Demacia pray to the aspect of justice, which they call the Winged Protector. That's why Demacia has a lot of angelic statues. Coincidentally, the aspect of
pregano Kyle.
justice can also be found in League, its scale. So what's happening is that when Garen is casting his ultimate, it is not him magically creating a holy blade in the sky. It is actually the aspect of justice answering his call. So even though this universe doesn't really have a paladin class, which would be casting holy spells, this would be a really cool alternative. People who worship the aspect of justice and let her answer their call.
Cioè mi stai dicendo che quando Garen ulta è Kyle che ulta? È Kyle che fa spawnare una mega spada? Questa cosa non la sapevo.
Pretty cool, but now let's move on to Noxus. Noxians are one of the only regions who harvest black powder, so they also have their own mercenaries with functional guns. In Noxus you can also find a lot of demonic cultists, so I would expect a warlock or a demon summoner, and they also have a few renowned assassin guilds. And the
E si sa chi sono gli assassini di Noxus.
most unique of them all, Noxus also has a circle of hemomancers, people who follow Vladimir.
Madonna, quando ci sarà un raid con Vladimir, quando lo ammazzo io sborro.
A lord who used to be a hostage to the Darkin, and who eventually learned how to use their blood magic. So these people used the very same blood magic that shaped the Darkin. Then in Shurima, we may find arcane mages. These people follow Zerath, the most powerful mage on Runeterra, whose body has been reduced to nothing but arcane energy. I would honestly love to see this class in-game, because I love the idea of having an Archon form on cooldown.
Figata, fighissimo. Cioè praticamente sei un eteromorfo. Non hai una forma fisica, ma sei fatto di pura energia.
Shurima also has some prophets who can open up tiny portals into the void and summon tiny void creatures. It would be sort of like Warlock in WoW. You know, use the power of the enemy against themselves. Then there are the Sand Shifters, people who can use the sand to create sand mirror images.
Diventiamo degli Azir.
And we can't forget about
Muori, bastardo!
the Chronomancers, people who use time magic in a lot of creative, interesting ways. Then, in Piltover, riding off of the success of Arcane, people will want to play as a Warden, which is a more elite version of the Enforcers. These would be equipped with sniper rifles and stun grenades. On the crafty side, there are also the Hextech.
Questa cosa sarà giocata da molti. Io stesso, se non fossi così legato al fatto che voglio diventare un mini Z, molto probabilmente vorrei fare qualcuno con un fucile.
Engineers. These are the people who can use science to allow them to wield magic even if
Madonna,
they are
ma che bello deve essere avere un cazzo di cannone a propulsione in una mano tipo Mega Man.
not mages. And separate from them, there are also the Artificers. To them, anything from a powerful arm to blade legs should be possible. And down in Zone, I would love to see some kind of an alchemist, who's using questionable drugs to help his allies. Next we go into the Freljord. Here we can find the Draklorn Inquisitors, which are
Abbastanza riassumi cosa si tratta questo video. Speculazioni su quali potrebbero essere le razze e le classi del gioco di Riot.
Lysandra's followers with abilities themed around true ice. Essentially, these would be frost battle mages. But perhaps the most iconic for the Freljord would be the Shamans. These worship the animalistic primal gods of the Freljord, and all their abilities mimic the primal gods, be it a bear, a fox, a mammoth, or a boar. Then on Targon we would find a lot of people with celestial powers, you know, calling down stars and such. But there are also the Solari who use the power of the sun to enhance their attack.
Farò una mia gilda? Assolutamente sì. Assolutamente sì. La chiamerò Deathmark.
They also wear massive plated armor, so this would be the tank class. Or the Lunari, who use the power of the moon
che belli
to
lunari,
stay in the
cazzo.
shadows. This would be more of an assassin class.
Decisamente.
Besides these, there are also a
No. 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 N-O. N-O. No.
lot of star callers around, and even draconic worshippers. Then in Ionia, besides the Vuju Blade Masters, which would be far too overpowered, some people choose to fight without a blade. These would be the monks of Hirana.
Oh, il classico monk, il monk deve essere per forza.
They channel the power of Ionian dragons to empower their limbs.
È figo.
And don't worry, they are a bit different from the traditional monks. They are far more badass. Think less Bruce Lee and more Dragon Ball. But of course, Ionia is also home to the Kinku ninjas. Their goal is to maintain balance in Ionia.
Se non mi metti
This
Zed mi
means
incazzo,
that when a spirit starts killing people, the ninjas go out and deal with the spirit.
Se non mi metti Zed mi incazzo,
And when people start terrorizing the spirits, the ninjas go out and deal with the people. Most of these are your classic ninjas empowered with spiritual magic. But some are using the forbidden shadow technique. And while they surely look evil, just like anything in League of Legends, it's not really one-sided. These ninjas are simply using questionable techniques to protect their homeland. And honestly, the Shadow Ninjas are so iconic for Ionia, I really do believe they will be playable. Then we get...
No! Ok, I believe they will be... Ok, avevo capito not. Mi sta venendo un infarto. Vabbè che lui non è che sa quelle cose che arriveranno, sta solamente speculando, però.
To Bilgewater. Besides all the things that you could do with pirates and monster hunters, the most iconic class of this place are the priests of Buru. The Buru worship the god of motion called Nagakeboros.
Nel gioco The Legend of Ruin King, il Loi è anche un healer, è un tank healer. Quindi non è che si chiama priestess a caso. Trial, è un po' difficile da spiegare.
While they are priests, they fight with full physical strength, while borrowing power from the god to empower themselves. Usually this means the god spawns tentacles to smack the enemies around.
Sono praticamente dei fighter support, praticamente. Cioè, ti picchiano ma si curano pure. E curano gli altri. Il loro come sarà nell'MMO non lo so. Ma secondo me, ragazzi, i campioni saranno o tutti NPC, per forza, o alcuni raid boss. Quelli veramente troppo forti, tipo Mordekaiser, o Nasus, Renekton, queste cose qui.
But they also have healing powers. So that would be a really cool support class.
Esattamente.
In Riot's RPG called Ruined King, you can play as Illaoi, the High Priestess of Nagakeboros. And there you can see all the attacks she can pull off.
Esatto, se avete giocato a questo gioco, quello che vi sto dicendo prima, vedete che Illaoi picchia e si cura. Come fa nel gioco, d'altronde. Si picchia e si cura.
And this takes us to the last place. Ishtal, which will most likely be saved for an expansion. As I mentioned in the last video, Ishtal specializes in only one thing.
Elemental magic.
So if elemental mages become a class, and they should, even in League, elemental dragons are a core mechanic. they would come from Ishtal. But that's it for all the unique classes this universe has to offer. Funnily enough, when I was drafting all these classes, I realized a lot of them fall under specific categories. So going with the skin idea for all the classes wouldn't be...
Che poi, attenzione, ci potrebbe essere la classe e la sottoclasse. In molti giochi, in molti MMO c'è. Inizi da Warrior e poi ti specializzi, vai o Warrior Tank o Warrior Fury. Capito?
too unreasonable.
Anche, che ne so, il classico shooter con le pistole. Fucile oppure pistole. Cioè, ci si può dividere in diversi rami.
But developing so many artistic variations of the classes would be taxing. So overall, I believe Riot should not care about disappointing some players for not including their favorite class. With so many options, it's going to happen anyway. Instead, pick a couple of classes that simply make sense for you. You know, a Blade Master here, an Arcane Mage there, and just have fun. Having fun during development usually translates into great experiences. And I hope I'm not pressuring anyone by stirring up hype. If anything, I'm just happy that people find these videos interesting. And all I'm...
Ah, esatto. Riot, se mi stai guardando, non credo ci siano molti in Italia che fanno video sull'MMO, forse solamente Terenas. Appena esce, sappiate che io voglio provarlo in anteprima. Ricordatevelo.
doing is presenting information that Riot released over the past 10 years. I mean, I know the video is interesting because Asmon only paused 3 times and he said,
That's fucking cool.
and,
I like it a lot.
and,
What the fuck? This is actually really cool. I didn't know any of this.
that to me marks a big success. Next time we are going to talk about all the already established raid bosses of this universe.
Oh, bello.
Which is a very personal topic for me. You know, I am a father, my son is 2 years old. So by the time this MMO comes out, he's going to be just the right age to heal my raids.
No, speriamo di no. Speriamo veramente che non sarà in 10 anni. Io voglio essere positivo e dico 5. Voglio essere positivo e dico 5 e dico 3 per la prima open beta. Voglio essere molto molto positivo e spero di aver ragione. Va bene. Che dire? Me ne vado a fanculo. Me ne vado via. E ho finito. Ci vediamo stasera. Bye bye.